And as of today, they estimate that the actions taken in putting USAID in the wood chipper, child malnutrition, 53,500 more deaths. Child diarrhea, 45,400 more deaths. Child pneumonia, 59,200 more deaths. Malaria, 25,100 more deaths. So what happened that weekend has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children. And your contracts in this fashion, freezing fund, firing individuals, has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children.
That's false. That's fake. That's just not true. That's a study based on if we canceled every one of these programs permanently. Remember, the numbers are 100,000 children have starved to death in the last 4 months because the United States made reductions to USAID. Well, that first of all, is pretty atrocious. That would mean that nobody else in the world is doing anything. We're taking care of the entire planet?
His Doge team did a lot of cancellations.
The Doge team didn't do anything. I did it. I was the one that made the decisions. I went through contracts, literally spreadsheets, line by line. I remember being in a hotel, I believe in Guatemala, going through line by line on spreadsheets of contracts that were canceled, contracts that were approved.
Merkley's line of questioning wasn't political theater. It was forensic moral accountability. Because the moment you strip away the bureaucratic language, the contracts, the efficiencies, and the spreadsheets, what you're left with is horrifyingly simple. Hundreds of thousands of children are dead or dying because of choices made behind closed doors, by people who will never have to see those faces, hold those hands, or witness those funerals. Tens of thousands of children dead from malnutrition, pneumonia, diarrhea, not because the medicine didn't exist, but because aid didn't reach them. Not because the disease was unstoppable, but because politics got in the way of compassion.
Second chance to ask some questions of you today. Thank you for testifying in multiple committees. Back in March, you noted that you had revoked some 300 student visas using the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act, which specifically says the Secretary of State can revoke a visa if an alien's activity in the U.S. would have a serious adverse foreign policy consequence. And that issue of 300, what's the number up to now? How many visas have you revoked?
I don't know the latest count, but we probably have more to do.
Can you give us an estimate?
Probably in the thousands at this point, depending. Not all of them are under that statute. Some are people. So there's two visa revocations.
I don't want to go into SEVIS. It's a separate issue. And
No. They're related, but we can't conflate them because they're two different. One is the one you've just cited, national interest of the United States. Some of the visa revocations are happening because somebody violated the terms of their visa. They dropped out of school or they got convicted of a crime or some criminal investigation. Okay. Those are separate from what you've said.
So 300 in March, but now 1,000. How many under this 1952 Act?
I'd have to get you a good answer, but probably under 1,000. But I'd have to get you the right answer. I don't want to speculate about the exact number.
And I'll tell you, this particular thing, it does bother me. And you testified in Louisiana Immigration Court in a pretty expansive interpretation of that 52 law, saying that it could be for citizens, it extends to any non-citizen for past, current, or expected beliefs, statements, or association. And that expected really caught my mind. This power rests solely, this 1950 law rests solely with you. And your interpretation sounds like you're saying if you, the Secretary of State, think you expect someone's beliefs or statements, past, current, or future, then you can toss their visa.
The visa is not a right, it's a privilege.
All right, so I will just say, and then I'm going to go on to another topic, I profoundly disagree. The Fifth Amendment is very powerful in protecting citizens and non-citizens alike with due process. I know this will be adjudicated in court, but the idea that one individual could on their opinion of someone's future activity or expected activity, that one individual, being our Secretary of State, can toss somebody's visa, seems to me an extraordinary violation of due process. I won't ask you to defend it now. I'm happy to put it in writing for you to give us a follow-up and explain it better. But I do think it's a fundamental attack on freedom because due process is the guardian of the gate to keep a government from taking away people's life or liberty, and liberty is what happens when you take away a visa without due process. I want to turn to the issue my colleagues have mentioned, and that is there is a legal way to restructure the Secretary of State's department and USAID specifically. But what we saw on February 3rd was Elon Musk say, over the weekend, I tossed USAID into the wood chipper. That's a pretty profound weekend. It didn't involve consultation with Congress over the consequences. There was no rewriting of the law. There was no discussion of what funds could be delayed, frozen, redirected. And the result is different groups have estimated how many people have died to date and will die over the course of a year or a prolonged period as a result of the destruction of the weekend of February 1st and 2nd. Did Elon Musk have your support in putting USAID into the wood chipper?
Well, I don't think that's a X post, or I guess you're imagining a social media post, is not a government
Not
act.
at all. That's a quote. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, that's what he said, but that's not ultimately what happened as acting director. Is all these decisions
Did
have to
his
come to
actions
me.
have your full support
The ones that I signed off on, yes, which is the ones that
of
happened.
what
because
Elon Musk did with USAID?
No, but understand, these are contracts. All these
Did he do it
contracts.
without or with your support? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Well, not
Because
my
his
support, it was my
team,
actions.
his Doge team did a lot of cancellations very, very quickly, and it fired a lot of people. It wasn't clear to me whether that had your
No,
support or not.
the Doge team didn't do anything. I did it. I was the one that made the decisions. I went through contracts, literally spreadsheets, line by line. I remember being in a hotel, I believe in Guatemala, going through line by line on spreadsheets of contracts that were canceled, contracts that were approved, contracts that were amended. These are all contracts.
So in that case, I'll put the responsibility with you since you're taking credit for it rather than with Elon Musk. But the Boston School of Public Health has a kind of a website where they post their estimated deaths as a result of the actions that were taken to dismantle USAID. And they're updating it continuously. So you go to it, the numbers keep changing. They have a one-year estimate, but they also have what they estimate has happened to today. And as of today, they estimate that the actions taken in putting USAID in the wood chipper, child malnutrition, 53,500 more deaths. And I'm rounding off because the numbers are continuously changing. Child diarrhea, 45,400 more deaths. Child pneumonia, 59,200 more deaths. Malaria, 25,100 more deaths. So what happened that weekend has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children. And the estimate for the end of this year is much, much higher. This happened because the law was not followed for consultation with Congress, analysis, bringing in experts, holding hearings. How do you kind of accept what you just put forward, that it was your action to cancel these contracts? Your contracts in this fashion, freezing fund, firing individuals, has resulted in the death of hundreds of thousands of children.
That's false. That's fake. That's just not true. That's a study based on if we canceled every one of these programs permanently. Okay, and I'm reading it right here because I'm glad you brought it up. It assumes a near total freeze in U.S. foreign aid for HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and other diseases. There is not a total freeze. 85% of PEPFAR recipients are receiving their care right now. But the numbers you're saying, those aren't real numbers. I understand that's what the school said in the worst case dramatic scenario. And even then, I think it's exaggerated. But there's just no evidence of the fact that, I don't remember what the numbers are, 100,000 children have starved to death in the last 4 months because the United States made reductions to USAID. Well, that first of all, is pretty atrocious. That would mean that nobody else in the world is doing anything. We're taking care of the entire planet?
Well, I must say, I think your response does not fit with what the published results were, but there's other groups that have done this as well. There's a study in Nature with healthcare experts from a whole number of leading universities, and they said basically if you shut down USAID, and it may not be fully shut down, but my colleagues who follow this closely say, it's 80, 90% shut down. And Nature study, or published in Nature, said, look, because of what has happened, we will see some 15 million additional deaths over 15 years just from HIV, producing 14 million orphans, and another 10 million people, children and adults, dying from malnutrition, tuberculosis, diarrhea, malaria, and other diseases. And there's even higher numbers from the Friends of the Global Fight Against AIDS. I think it's this rash shutdown without due process of law, that is not coming and doing it in collaboration with rewriting the law, freezing funds, canceling these contracts without consultation, that you have exacted enormous harm on the world.
Again, those numbers you're saying are staggering and unrealistic. The reality of it is, if what you're saying is that unless the United States funds foreign aid at these levels in perpetuity, the world's going to suffer 15 million deaths in 15 years, and every country should be voting for everything we want at the UN.
The number was 15,
because we're basically funding and feeding the world.
15 million in the study of nature, yes, from the shutdown of these programs.
Thank you.
What you just saw wasn't a typical exchange between a senator and a cabinet member. It was a moral reckoning. Senator Jeff Merkley stood there not just as a lawmaker, but as a voice for conscience, for decency, for humanity itself. And sitting across from him, Secretary Rubio, was the embodiment of what happens when power becomes detached from empathy, when leadership forgets the cost of its own decisions. Think about that. A government agency, USAI, dismantled in a weekend. One of the most respected humanitarian institutions in the world, responsible for saving millions of lives, tossed into what Elon Musk himself mockingly called the wood chipper. Those were his words, and Rubio confirmed the actions. Merkly came armed not with rhetoric, but with evidence, data from the Boston School of Public Health, projections from nature, and figures that would make any moral person stop cold. Rubio's defense? He called it fake. He said the studies were worst-case scenarios, that the numbers were exaggerated, as if exaggeration makes a child's death any less real, as if dismissing data could somehow resurrect lives lost to bureaucratic arrogance. What we witnessed was more than a clash of facts. It was a clash of philosophies. Merkly sees America's role as a force for good, not perfect, but striving, compassionate, engaged. Rubio represents a new and dangerous ideology, one that cloaks cruelty in the language of reform and efficiency. The idea that cutting humanitarian aid somehow makes America stronger. But it doesn't. It makes us smaller. It makes us colder. It makes us complicit. Because what is leadership if not moral responsibility? What is patriotism if it isn't rooted in the belief that our power should serve humanity? Merkley's outrage wasn't just justified, it was necessary. Because when a nation starts measuring its greatness by the dollars it saves instead of the lives it saves, it has lost its way. And let's be clear, USAI is not charity, it's strategy. It's how America builds alliances, prevents wars, stabilizes fragile nations before they collapse into chaos. Every vaccine delivered, every child educated, every village supplied with clean water, those are seeds of peace and goodwill that protect our own national security. When you cut those programs, you're not saving money. You're sowing instability. You're opening the door to desperation, and in desperation, extremism thrives. Merkly made that moral equation plain. Behind every contract canceled is a life. Behind every program streamlined is a mother left to bury her child. Behind every frozen fund is a community pushed closer to collapse. He didn't speak like a politician. He spoke like someone who remembers that public service is supposed to serve the public, not corporate interests, not billionaire vanity projects, not ideological crusades. And Rubio's cold response, that America can't fund the entire planet, that these deaths are exaggerated, was telling. Because that's how moral decay begins, one act of denial at a time, one justification layered over another, until the unthinkable becomes normal. The truth is this: America's greatest power has never been its weapons. It's been its willingness to care, to show up when famine strikes, when disease spreads, when tyranny crushes hope. That's what distinguished us. That's what gave our diplomacy credibility. And when we turn our back on that legacy, we don't just betray the world, we betray ourselves. So when Merkly asked, "How do you accept that your actions caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands of children?" that wasn't a question. That was an indictment. A statement of moral fact, a demand that someone, somewhere, take responsibility for what has been lost. This wasn't a partisan moment. This was about humanity, about who we are when the cameras stop rolling. It was a reminder that policies have faces, they have names. And every time power turns a blind eye to suffering, democracy itself loses a piece of its soul. If we're serious about moral leadership, if we believe that America should be a force for good, then this moment cannot pass unnoticed, because silence is complicity. And if we don't speak for those who can't, then who are we? So share this, talk about it, ask your representatives where they stand. Because what happens in Washington doesn't just echo through the halls of power, it reverberates through every corner of the world where America once stood as a symbol of hope. And right now, hope is what's on the line.